Hi, my name is Charles Livaudais. I'm a veterinarian here at Harmony Animal Hospital and work as the co-medical director for the hospital. As you might imagine, we get a lot of questions regarding feeding of dogs and cats, and specifically the feeding of puppies. I thought I would take this opportunity to go through some of the more common questions we get regarding the feeding of puppies. The very first question we get, as you might expect, is, what do I feed my puppy? Well, there are a number of reputable foods out there, but what I would always look for any dog or cat food is a food made by a reputable manufacturer that bears the AAFCO label. AAFCO stands for the American Association of Feed Control Officials, and they're a voluntary group of local, state, and federal agents who are tasked with monitoring the feed quality and distribution of foods to pets in the United States. There are 3 different guidelines you might see on an AAFCO label on a puppy bag. One is that the food has been actually tested on puppies through food trials. That would be the best label you can see. You might also see a label that says the food contains nutrients comparable to a food that has actually been tested. And then the last one is that the food contains nutrients that should satisfy AAFCO labels. Ideally, we'd feed one of the foods that has actually been tested and made sure that it works well for puppies. Again, there are a number of those, but be sure to look for that AAFCO label. Another question we get is, when should a puppy start to eat puppy food? And should it be dry or canned? Well, if you get a puppy, that puppy should at least be 6 to 8 weeks old, I hope, and should already be on puppy food. Whether that food should be dry or canned depends a lot on the age and size of your puppy and how well its teeth have come in. But if your puppy can eat dry kibble, especially if it's small kibble, that would be fine. There are pros and cons to both. Canned food can be a little rich, it can be a little rough on the stomach, but at the same time it can help keep your puppy better hydrated. Dry food, on the other hand, is often a little easier to digest, and it can also help reduce the rate at which tartar accumulates on your pet's teeth. But some dogs can have a little trouble chewing those kibble when they're smaller or very young. So just make sure that your puppy can, in fact, chew and swallow the food, and as long as their stools are good and healthy, no worries. Dry or canned, whichever works best for you. The next question we get is, how often should we feed a puppy? And the answer to that also depends on the size and age of your dog. When puppies are very young, say less than 8 or 10 weeks, and if they're very small, say around 5 pounds or less, it is helpful to feed them 3 or 4 times a day to help maintain their sugar or glucose levels in the blood. Sometimes very small puppies have a difficulty maintaining that blood sugar level. As they get bigger, however, and your veterinarian can help guide you in this depending on the age and size of your puppy, we can go down from 4 to 3 and then twice or even once a day as we feed. Another question we get is, are grain-free dog foods okay for my puppy? Or high-protein dog foods okay for my puppy? And the answer is, we do see some issues, or we have seen some issues over the years with grain-free foods. The issues don't necessarily seem to be the lack of grains themselves, but it can be due to the products that are used as a carbohydrate substitute when we're not using grains for carbohydrates. We have seen some dogs develop heart problems on these foods, and so I would say use those foods with caution. I would probably prefer that a dog eat a food with some grains in it, just to be sure that we are keeping that heart health the best we possibly can. Puppy foods already contain a lot of protein, so it would definitely be better to keep your puppy on a puppy-specific food than feed it a high-protein adult food. You can also see some foods that say they are for all life stages, from puppyhood to geriatric status. And those foods do contain the calorie requirements for puppies. The challenge, though, is if they are not made specifically for puppies, they might not have the right ratios of calcium and phosphorus in the diet, which is important for bone growth, especially in those large and giant breed dogs. And that's why it's always best to use a puppy-specific diet. And for the large and giant breed dogs, I probably would use a food that is formulated for the needs of large or giant breeds. The next question that we see is, how long does my puppy need to eat puppy food? That too depends on the size of your dog. We want your puppy to eat puppy food for roughly a period that equates to about 80% of their growth. And so for small and medium-sized dogs, we usually recommend feeding your puppy puppy food until they're about 12 months of age. For large and giant breed dogs, though, we would usually recommend waiting a little longer, especially if your dog is particularly large. We tend to recommend waiting until they're about 18 months of age before starting a transition. When you do transition your puppy from puppy to adult food, I would always recommend to do that quite slowly. The truth is, with any food transition, we should do it quite slowly, because too abrupt a transition from one food to another can lead to stomach upset. So I always say take it slow. Use a little bit of the new food for a few days, but mostly old food for a few days, and then change the ratio slowly so that it takes 7 to 10 days before your dog is completely over to the new food.